Serious, people who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? Serious. 3 men drugged me and kidnapped me. I woke up on a floor with one of them tearing my clothes off and my moon boot. Broken foot. I tried kicking him off with the boot but he started knocking my head into the floor and I passed out. I woke up in daylight in a garbage bin. Naked and in a pool of my own blood. I don't know how the duck I got out of there or how I found the nearest policeman but I then collapsed again. Woke up in a hospital with 52 stitches in my head and 78 in and around my vulva and breasts. Doctor said it was the worst abuse trauma she ever saw. They say it's a miracle I'm alive and don't know how I did it. They were never caught. I am a crisis, trauma and PTSD counselor now. They didn't win. Edit. I never thought I'd get a response like this. I woke up and thought my Reddit notifications was on crack. Geez guys. Thank you so ducking much for the compliments and support. It's a bit overwhelming tbh and I don't know what to say except thank you. You guys are amazing. Also, thanks for all the bling. That really wasn't necessary but so cool. Thanks. Clear up. I am a woman and I am married and I posted in our animals being derps a pic of my husband and doggo speak is encouraged so the dad was referring to my husband. Lastly, to the people who say I'm lying or looking for attention. Suck my metaphorical balls. Edit 2. Thank you once again. Hope you guys don't mind but I printed the thread with all the amazing messages and I've added to my notice board. I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November so it was already dark by 5 PM. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and starting dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze. Because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk. Called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. Edit. Somehow believed for nearly 14 years I was 15 when this happened. Turns out I was 14. Edited to correct. Second edit. Thank you so much for my first gold. O circumflex Y with diaresis copyright airing. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother but I would always stop her. I was 8. She was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me but after she aggressively pushed me under the third time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that. It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was sorry I tried to drown you. It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone. My husband and I live above our place of business. Our alarm company called us at 3 AM to say there was a motion detector alert. Just one. In a weird place. We assumed it was a mouse but went to reset check it out. Husband ended up face to face with a burglar who was on his way out the window he had broken. He ran back inside. I called 911 and we heard mad chaos going on in the depths of the building. So much crashing and smashing. Burglar monkey climbed a 10-foot iron gate. Bodily smashed through 2 sets of commercial grade glass doors and was outside again. My husband was like yeah duck this dude. Tore after him and tackled him. He got him on the ground and pinned him. Bear in mind the whole time I'm narrating to 911. and chasing around in panties and tank top. I was a bit behind my husband, in the middle of the street about 15 feet away when a minivan squealed around the corner. It was his GF getaway driver. I luckily missed it. I was super focused on reading the license plate, which was one of those cutesy font out of state ones and therefore hard to read, but she yelled, "Get the duck off him or I'm running your edge over." Then she tried to. The audio and video I had to watch for the trial was horrifying. I had blocked it out nearly completely and really didn't remember how close it was. She guns the engine at me. I throw my hands up in front of my face when I realize what she's doing and scream and jump out of the way with inches to spare. He jumped in and off they went. He bled all over my husband. Yikes. And eventually the DNA and the partial plate info nailed them. They're both in prison. Addendum. Trials suck. Eater. To make this clear, do not do this. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug and it's best to not fight burglars. We definitely both could have died. It was the third time this ducker had broken in and caused $XXX amount of mostly uninsured damage and inventory loss, and that definitely contributed to the whole thing. He wouldn't have stopped doing it. He was a pro and was doing upwards of 3 jobs a night most nights, all over the state, for years. I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around and a minivan was heading for us. The few people around this woman, they already started to run, but I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee, put the car in reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward and run over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the women's BF, whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues. And my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. Edit. For everyone wondering about the guy, an off-duty cop watched the whole thing go down and copied his license plate number. He was apprehended 20 minutes later and charged with attempted murder, along with many other things. He pleaded out to just 3 years in jail. He had actually killed someone else a few years before drunk driving. How they thought that was appropriate is beyond me. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between 2 countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking, so I said no. Go ahead, you do it. I was also joking, but it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least, but they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people that depended upon tourism. Serious. I had a guy high on both meth and acid break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside. I'm doing bushes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know, he is behind me. I'm being choked to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness, I grabbed my roommate's acrylic bong and frantically swung over my shoulder into his face. The bong broke but did nothing as the guy was choking me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the bong broke the first time, I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterward, his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially, I scalped him with a bong. So I chase the guy out of my house. There is easily 2 feet of snow outside. He tries walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut. Seriously, and he passes out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. And that's the part I was surprised about the most. I hit the guy on his scalp. There isn't much blood in a scalp compared to most the body, but my kitchen was covered in blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor and ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now as for the guy, the cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed blood transfusions. He was charged with assault, breaking and entering and attempted murder. And he def had drugs on him too. Not sure what he got convicted of, but he went to jail for 4 years. Edit. Sorry for the confusion over acrylic versus glass, guys. I'm not the biggest stoner it seems. I guess the bong was just glass, not acrylic. I, 18F back then, now 25, was on my way home at night after meeting a friend. My home was just 10 minutes away from the train station. After a few minutes I felt someone following me. No big deal, I toughed. Just someone else walking home. But I started walking faster. I realized the person behind me was catching up. Weird. In my head I started to make up scenarios of how to defend myself if the person would attack me. Never would I think of this to actually happen. Well, until I felt something on the back of my head, hitting me hard. I went furious. I turned around and attacked the guy. My mind was just full of anger towards this stranger who, what I thought, hit me. We were wrestling until I fell on the ground. He was sitting on top of me, strangling me. I tried to crawl my nails into his eyes as deep as I could, but I started to black out. Suddenly there was this tuft in my head, wake up, or you will die. Well, adrenaline kicked in again and I opened my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs. Attacking him again. That helped. He stood up and began to run. I laid there for a few seconds. Then I started to run home. Still screaming. My mom was already at our door and opened for me because my screams woke her up. Or her mother's senses. Who knows? She immediately called the cops and they could arrest him on the same night. It turned out that he actually shot me in my head from behind. They assume that the gun didn't work properly. The bullet didn't penetrate my skull and stuck in there. But as far as I know they never found out why the gun misfired. I'm glad though. He told the cops that he already followed me a few times in the past, but never had the guts to do it. He wanted to kill me and abuse my dead body. I know that's a wild story. I have some Swiss newspaper articles as a source if someone cares though. Throwaway because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500K from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison. A bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had, criminal, civil and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get this incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. If you're from the area I'm from, this will probably sound familiar, but I got absolutely blackout drunk at an end of the year graduation party and ended up having to get taken home early. Later that night another student at the party ended up stabbing and killing 5 people. Turns out he had mental issues, schizophrenia, and thought everyone at the party was a werewolf vampire who threatened his life. He never went to jail but ended up being found non-criminally responsible instead. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore it must all be an act and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away. Came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind me to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to WTF was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying weird it. I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that Ashad just so I can it on his grave. Well, my mom got mad at me when I was 20 and I didn't give her money for her birthday, which I'm assuming was to pay off drug dealers of hers. So she stabbed me between the ribs, ended up getting stuck in the bone and had to get it taken out in surgery. I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken, and as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I'm paralyzed with fear, so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, "Why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people." I go to the ATM, take out cash, give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We pass by some train tracks and I'm thinking this is it. This is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school, and I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that it. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me drive away sweetheart. I call the cops. Had to do a lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women, and some were less unscathed than I was. Mine's not extreme by any chance, but a couple of years ago my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 PM. We left through the side gate, live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate the dude says something like, "Oh I mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a ducking hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible drug-fueled abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me. I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me. I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black. Then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yank them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night. I was around 20-21 years old and walking home at about 3 AM after a night out, and I was absolutely plastered from drinking so much. I was about 200 meters from my house when a hooded figure jumped out from behind a bush and immediately had a knife pushing into my stomach as he grabbed my neck and tried pulling me in. Fortunately I was stronger and pulled away. He went to lunge at me with the knife when suddenly he stopped. Stared for what felt like an eternity but was probably a second or two and then said, "Holy it race your spoon for. I haven't seen you in so long. My bad mate," and then walked off like nothing had happened. I still don't know who he was to this day. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans, we were robbed. It was late, and my co-worker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day. So when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that, Until, that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical give me all the money spiel and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, and so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart with whatever substance he was on. He wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my co-worker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. 1 year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, car full of coked up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently my friend owed them money. They pointed a gun at him and said that if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drive off like it was nothing. And I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was gonna pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. TLDR. Almost got shot but was saved by random drug dealer who turned out to be a decent fellow. Chilling with a bros drinking at a park. As we drive off to leave, a car coming our way almost hits us. Driver obviously reacts like WTF and I guess the other car noticed. They turned around and caught up to us at a stop sign. Other driver asked if we had a problem. We told them stop driving like assholes. Then their back window rolls down and 2 guys in the back draw Glocks with drum magazines. We just kind of froze up at first but then our driver pulled off hastily. Later found out those guys got arrested for shooting someone else that same day. When I was a kid I was riding my bike home from a friend's house at sunset. I rode past the community pool which had been closed for a couple months. There was a car in the lot with a guy in it. I didn't think much of it as I continued the trek home. I cut through the local elementary parking lot which is gates. I get like 20 yards past the gate and I see that car pull up at the bottom. Thinking that's odd. Anyhow he backs out away from the gate. My spidey senses were kinda tingling at this point. I get up to the school and head towards teacher parking lot which is my standard direction. As I'm about to turn the corner I see headlights from the parking lot. I stop and peek around the corner and it's that ducking guy again. I flip my bike around and start going the long way around the school. He sees me but just gets back in his car and starts driving around the front of the school. I camp in these bushes, heart pounding. He is slowly driving up and down the front of the school keeping an eye on the teacher's lot. Another car comes down the street and he has to move his dumb car out of their way. As soon as he does I just blasted up to the street and full tilt flew my bike into some random open garage. So I'm hiding in the garage waiting for him to come around again. But he doesn't. I give it a few minutes then decide to pop my head out. Still no one. Okay, I'm a few blocks from home, just gotta go for it. Bust out the bike and start hauling ass home. Not half a ducking block later this dude turns the corner on me. I just veer my bike into some random lawn and run up to the front door. I look at him and he's just in the street staring at me. I grip the front door handle praying to any and every god these people don't lock their doors. I see his reverse lights flicker and I know he just put it in park. I just rip that door open, run inside and slam it. 2 old people just sitting there. I look at them and I'm like some dude is trying to get me out there. They don't completely believe me cause they barely react to what I said. But they don't kick me out or anything either. I'm watching the dude from their window and he's just chilling. Then the grandpa looking dude gets up from his lazy boy and opens the curtain to look for himself. When he does this, the Ashat in the car just leaves. Old guy is like, well, looks like he's gonna leave. I'm like, I'm not leaving for a bit. So I hang out for 10 minutes and no creepy abductor car to be seen. I assume he figured I called the cops. Finally I'm like, I have to get home. This is before cell phones were common for average people. I hop on my bike and I swear it felt like I drove 35 miles per hour the whole way home. Get home and tell my parents. I'm exhausted and in complete shock. They basically brush me off. I'm stunned that every adult I interacted with acted like I was crazy. I basically never talked about it again. It was so traumatic to talk about at the time. That image of him in his car while I held the door handle to the random house is permanently seared into my brain. To this day it's still as crystal clear as if it happened yesterday. Like 18-20 years later I decided to confront my parents as to why they didn't do anything that day. They were like, WTF you talking about? I explained it far better than I could have when I was a kid in complete shock. How? With the current, more expansive explanation my mother BBB broke down. She started crying at this public restaurant cause she saw how serious I was when I was like, how could you ignore what I said that day? As well as talked about how that morphed my stranger danger techniques for better or worse. Thankfully I was on the verge of puberty and ended up becoming a giant human being, so my actual fears diminished quickly as I could defend myself. Until I moved away from that town however. I looked every day for that goddamned car. Never saw it again. I would fantasize about what I'd like to do if I ever found that guy. Hell, I still do. TLDR, dude tried abducting me at like 10-12 years old. Got lucky hiding in random garage in some old people's house. Never got any level of justice. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger.